Hi, Eloise.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me for this interview. I'm looking forward to learning so much about you and the amazing art of yoga and how it can help us with our singing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
I was wondering, obviously, yoga, it's so much connected to the breath, as is singing. I was wondering, with the inhale that we use for yoga, what would you say the similarities and differences are between the inhalation with yoga and singing?
That's a great question. I have found a major similarity is that you really want expansion of the ribs and the back. Some people might say that a difference is you would maybe breathe a little deeper in singing and feel that breath drop all the way down. Um, I I think that main reason that could be the case would be because of the bandhas, and you're always kind of trying to keep those muscles activated. I think that that's the main similarity and difference.
Are there three? Sorry, I'm such a beginner when it comes to these things, but are there three that you focus on with pranayama, so breathing exercises?
Yeah, so there are three main bandhas, and I would say they're quite important for the asana practice or the physical poses. When we do pranayama, you can kind of think of them and keep them in mind. You don't necessarily have to be overly vigilant or aggressive about them when you're doing the breathing practices, but they're good to keep in mind and sort of stay in contact with because um, Mula Bandha is at the base of your spine, your pelvic floor, those muscles. Uddiyana Bandha is right near the navel and sort of where the lower abs kind of meet the upper abs. And then Jalandhara Bandha is chin lock. And I don't know if I like to think of them as locks because then that kind of gets a lot of tension into my neck. But what it really helps with is just finding length with the back of the neck and kind of you'll gaze a little bit more forward and down and you'll bring the chest towards the chin at the same time you're bringing the chin towards the chest. And I would say that is the one bandha that we probably don't use 100% of the time in the physical poses. There are some poses where we use them and some poses where we don't want that. But Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha, I would say, are pretty consistent in the yoga practices.
Yeah, with what you were just saying about like the term lock and how that might denote a little bit of tension or something, but then when you were describing it about a lengthening and you know moving your gaze and things like that, it still seems like it's quite a an active process that nothing is going to be kind of held or like locked in a in the traditional sense of the word.
Yeah, very true. And I say that the same, I mean, the same with any pose too. Even if we're in like a downward facing dog for 5 breaths, it's never static, you
Mm.
know? Even if you're not like making huge movements, you'll still kind of, at least I do, constantly have these micro adjustments going on while you're experiencing the pose.
Touching base back to the inhalation again, when you mention Bandha and how just kind of the relationship with that and how with breathing in for singing, how it might feel a little bit deeper in some ways. What is the relationship with the Bandhas and the inhalation?
That's a good question. I think the bandhas actually can help us sort of direct the inhalation and exhalation. And I don't want to say manipulation of the breath because we want breath to flow, but maybe more of like a consciousness, a conscious connection with the breath. And so, yeah, I would say that the bandhas sort of help us kind of direct the airflow where we want it.
Is there anything you would recommend for singers that are exploring Bandha that nothing gets too held in the process?
I think the main thing would be just notice if you are using muscles that aren't actually involved in the bandha, or if places are working that don't need to be working. That is probably the biggest thing. But with it, I would say with bandha, practice it with an ujjayi breath, um, and especially notice if you're holding breath. For me, I think this is from singing. I find it much easier to exhale through my nose than the inhalation, and so uh, as I've worked on Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha, I've found a little bit more ease with the inhale, at least in my physical practice when I practice poses.
Interesting. I noticed when I was doing a little bit of research on pranayama, and thank you for sending through some suggestions to get me started with that. That just how radically different the breath speeds are depending on which exercise you're doing. So I was wondering, what is the function of that? How are different breath speeds beneficial in the exercises?
I would say that it's what almost what we were talking about with the bandhas, that it's not manipulation, but it's a way to connect to your breath in a very conscious way. And whether it's these long, more controlled inhales and exhales, or it's something that's a little bit quicker, being able to feel the different energy levels. And I think especially it can help us connect to our nervous system. So if you have a breath that's a lot quicker, there might be more of a connection to the sympathetic nervous system, which is kind of what we all have been living in this past year, right? Like the fight or flight. To be honest, that that can really help energize the body if you're breathing a little bit quicker. Longer breaths, I would say, are more in the parasympathetic nervous system area. They can help with the rest and digest. They're very grounding. So, yeah.
Do you find that, because obviously when we're singing different types of repertoire, sometimes we sing more lyrical lines and sometimes we need to sing things like coloratura that move very quickly. Do you find that having a little bit more practice with different types of pranayama has kind of impacted the way you approach the breath with different types of repertoire?
That's a great question. I think that it has, because it has helped increase my awareness of the type of breath that I need for a specific piece that I'm singing. And whenever I'm preparing a piece, I always am, speaking it on rhythm and trying to coordinate the conversation between my mind and my body about how much breath I'll actually have to take in. And so I guess I would say that it's made me a little bit more coordinated with my mind, body, and breath, all, kind of working together.
Again, in my research, so reading about Ujjayi, so the ocean breath, I had heard kind of mixed things, if it was something that should be embraced by singers or something that we should be a little bit wary of. Some people had mentioned that it may create a little bit of tension in the throat. I was wondering what your thoughts were on it. Is something that you like to include in your practice, and why?
Yeah, I love to include it in my practice. I think, everybody has to try it and see if it works for them. But in my experience, it creates a throat that is much more open, which I think is really good for singing. And even though the vocal cords, you're kind of keeping the cords together as you're breathing in and out through the nose, it actually can reveal where maybe your throat is tense and holding. And I think that's information that singers can work with if we practice Ujjayi. So I incorporate it into my own practice.
How has regular yoga practice affected your singing?
I noticed when I really started committing to a regular practice that my breath was just more connected to my body, and I was more in my body when I was singing. My voice was more open. Not to say that it was darker, but it was more open and freer. But when I really started practicing actually pranayama regularly, I noticed that I had a greater sense of what a piece or a specific repertoire required from me in terms of breath.
Did you begin singing first and then you came to yoga and then you brought the two together? What was your journey? How did all of this come together for you?
Yeah, so I started singing when I was younger. I would say maybe 11, 12. Started taking lessons and then sang a lot of musical theater, and then my teacher gave me the 24 Italian songs and arias, and I started really becoming interested in classical. And then I would say that continued, and I would go in, and then in high school, my mom invited me a few times to go with her to yoga, but I didn't practice regularly. I would maybe go twice a month for maybe 6 months of the year, but nothing really regular. And then both of my sisters got a yoga certification, and one of them wanted to do another teacher training and get another certificate, but she didn't want to go alone. So she invited me, and I said, okay, I'll go to teacher training with you. And I got certified. And I think it was actually really at that point that I started practicing regularly. And I became interested in bringing the two together because I noticed the changes in my voice and how it helped me feel more embodied and present when singing or performing. So yeah, that's how I brought the two together.
It sounds like it's quite a family affair as well. So but two sisters and your mother are all yogis. So cool.
Yeah.
Are they singers as well?
No, they're not. My mom, she has a really nice voice, but when she was younger, she had really bad stage fright. So I think she was in a choir in elementary school and middle school, but she never really sang after that. But she has a lovely voice.
Right.
One of my sisters is tone deaf, and and the other one, she sings a little bit, but she's a writer. So
Right. So
yeah.
another creative, but it seems like you know where you got your voice from then.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And just one more little question. We've spoken a little bit about how yoga is such a great thing for singers. How do you think yoga is something that would be really beneficial for people to include in their self-care practice?
I think that it is really beneficial for a self-care practice because it can help you get out of your own head, especially meditation. I'm a thinker, so anytime that I'm able to like turn my mind off for a little bit, and not that meditation is turning my mind off, but it's a little, it provides me like a momentary place where I can just let my mind do its work and just observe, and it leaves me more present for the rest of my day. I'm a morning meditator, but some people really like doing it at night. And I think that that's really beneficial, just to be able to be more present. And the physical practice is beneficial for a self-care routine because it can help you be more in touch with your body. I don't think it's necessarily about being stronger or more flexible. It's just about being able to listen to your body and what it needs. And on a given day, there might be days where something more vigorous is helpful and days where something more restorative is really helpful. And I know for me, I'm a much more pleasant person to be around if I've moved my body. Like if I'm sedentary, it's kind of like being hangry for me. Like I get really cantankerous. So if I think the physical practice is good for self-care because if you're moving, I don't know, it endorphins. It helps you just be a little bit more pleasant to be around. And I think that's because when we spend time on ourselves and care for ourselves, we have more energy to care for others and be around and present with them.
For this chat, Eloise. It's been really eye-opening for a beginner like myself coming into yoga, and I really appreciate your time and your warmth and your generosity.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I hope that you keep trying out the pranayama and email me if you have questions. I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on it after you spend like a couple weeks and see how you feel.